Well, how about that? It's another good win for Minnesota. One that we needed, but one the Canucks needed a hell of a lot more. Because with this win, the Canucks aren't mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, but they really couldn't afford to lose this one. Sucks for them. I was honestly thinking this game would be pretty damn close, and it was. The score is not vindicative of the game. It's not indicative of the game. I'm not vindictive either. But let's go to the notes. Let's start off real quickly. Demko versus Talbot. So again, two goaltenders that are pretty reliable, and Demko is still a good goaltender for Vancouver. He may have let up 5 goals in this game, but some of that's on Demko, but at the same time, I feel like he can bounce back from that. But Minnesota started out in this game pretty strong, considering the fact that they, once again, always seem to get the forecheck going really easily, generate a bunch of chances, and just not really dominate, but more or less take control of the game in the first few minutes. And another good sign was that John Merrill is back. We finally get him back. He missed like 9 or 10 games, and he's finally out there playing again. So Jordy Ben was taken out of the lineup. We still don't have Foligno, Greenway, or Dumba. Greenway and Dumba skated today, but they did not play in this one. Foligno, I guess, is injured. I still need to check the injury report, but he's not with us right now. He will be back for the playoffs, so it's nothing too serious. Should be fine. And Mitchell Chaffee was still in, so they decided to give him a couple more reps as well. And another wrap-up to another story that happened earlier on in this season. Remember Hartman flipping off Evander Kane? Yeah, they finally got the total for that. It was well over $30,000, upwards of almost 40 at this point. Basically, for those who don't know the full story, Ryan Hartman gets into an entanglement with Evander Kane. He ends up flipping him off on national television. So, Ryan Hartman gets a fine that's like $4,250. What ends up happening is his Venmo ends up blowing up so much so that so many fans donated. Good chunk of them were Wild fans, but a couple more fans who just hated Evander Kane, including his ex-wife, which doesn't really look good on her part. But he had enough money to pay for the fine if he wanted to with those Venmos. But he's like, nope, you know what? I'm going to pay for the fine with my own money. But up until next Friday, which I think last Friday is when he cut it off. He basically said, all right, all the other Venmos going in, all of this will go to Children's Hospital of Minnesota. So, Nordy, either yesterday or today, delivered the final check to Children's Hospital of Minnesota. And it's probably one of the best stories of the NHL season, because I don't think anything like that has happened ever. Like, where something like a negative emotion like that turns into a positive story. But nonetheless, it's still a good story to have. So, the Wild started out in this period flying around the ice, generally controlling the play. But right up until 12:24 left in the first period, Vancouver suddenly wakes up. It's like after the first TV timeout happens, they shook off whatever rust they had, and they just went flying. They kept Minnesota bottled up in their zone for a good chunk of time, just basically leading to what Minnesota did in the first 8 minutes. So, good trade-off for both those two teams. 5:06, now chances are going both ways, and both teams are playing scrappy, physical style of hockey. Not too physical, but enough to the point where urgency is necessary for both of these squads in different ways. The Canucks definitely needed this because they are still trying to get into the playoffs, and they are one of the next teams to get eliminated if nothing else changes. And they really needed these 2 points. Minnesota needs these 2 points in order to jump ahead of St. Louis and get the second spot in the Central back. St. Louis plays tonight, so we'll see if we still have it. I think we do anyway because of the games in hand tiebreaker, but this was a good win. This was a good win we needed to have. 4:15, Minnesota again has trouble clearing the zone, which is not only a problem we have on penalty kills, which is why ours was one of the worst in the league for a good chunk of time, but just in regular 5-on-5, we can't seem to clear it out of the zone because it seems like every time we try to wrap the puck around the boards, they always pin it against the boards, drop it down, and then they get another shot on net. We never seem to just fire it out of the zone and just hope for the icing. Mainly because our face-offs aren't the best either. But regardless, Vancouver's still getting chances because we can't get it out of the zone. So even play throughout the first period. Then eventually, Matthew Highmore gets an interference penalty. So now Minnesota's on the power play with 1:18 to go in the first period. Then, and only 3 seconds later, Kirill Kaprizov accidentally hits Brad Richardson in the face. Completely incidental, but again, there was blood on the ice and he went down in a heap. So Kaprizov ended up getting a double minor for high sticking, and Wild fans would be like, well, dude, it was incidental. I mean, why the hell are they giving him a double minor? There was a lot of blood on the ice. It took a while to clean up, and it is high sticking. Whether it's incidental or not, your stick should not be able to hit the guy in the face. So a double minor ends up happening, and nothing ends up coming out of it because there's only 1:14 left, so the period just ends 0-0. So a hard-fought, scrappy period in the beginning, but nobody can seem to break the tie. Goaltenders are still standing on their heads. Shots are 11-8 in favor of Vancouver, but it's even both ways. Then the second period happens. Double minor is able to be killed off by Minnesota, which in reality is just, it was 4-on-4 because of the Highmore penalty, and then it turned into a small power play for the Canucks. They weren't able to get anything on it, so we go back to 5-on-5. And then, with 15:07 to go in the second period, his 31st of the season, the second star of the week last week, Kevin Fiala, does his magic again. Legit. He is making a hell of a case to get him re-signed to a much bigger contract because it seems like he deserves it. And I know there's still Wild fans out there who are like, yeah, but he is really streaky. Like, because it took him a while to actually start scoring this season. He had 2 in the beginning of the season, then dipped for like 20 games. It wasn't his fault, just pucks weren't going in. Then he finally gets one, and now, ever since Matt Boldy has come along, he has exploded. That line, that Gaudreau-Boldy-Fiala line is arguably one of our better lines. And that's because the Grief line is not there. If you have that line rolling, and it doesn't have Kaprizov, Hartman, and Zuccarello on it, which had some trouble, but now they finally got back their groove, and we still don't have the Grief line yet because that's the heavy hitting line, and that's only because players are out, and we still filled it in pretty well because Nick Bukestad had a good game, Nick Delorier had another good one. Like, literally, it's incredible. The fact that we now have 3 lines that can just roll off like crazy. And once we get Matt Dumba back, then our D-core is fine. And then we have 2 solid goalies, and then we look like a true contender. We just need guys back, and we need to get ahead of St. Louis. Because if we do that, and we have everybody back, confidence grows. And it will continue to grow. Basically, Fiala ended up one-touching this pass over to Gaudreau. Both those two enter the zone. Gaudreau able to pull everybody his way. He fires it back over to Fiala, who's on the back door, and he fires it in. That's his 31st of the season. An 8-game point streak for Fiala. And again, I wrote re-sign him because why not? He has done almost everything and more. I don't know what else he could do. Hat trick every night? He probably could. Just please re-sign him. But can't catch our breath at all because as they're announcing the Minnesota goal, and only 38 seconds later, Elias Pettersson gets one for the Canucks, assisted by Garland and Besser. Gaudreau and Boldy assist on Fiala's goal. But Garland and Besser get this one to assist on Pettersson's goal. Garland is behind the net for Minnesota. Minnesota's tangled up, just kind of slowly trying to pace over. They finally get to Garland, who throws it through them, through their legs, and then gets Pettersson in the slot, 5-hole, 1-1. Literally 38 seconds after Minnesota scores. Okay, that's fine. Because 12:50, Jared Spurgeon gets his 10th of the season, assisted by Duhaime and Middleton. And this is from a great shift from the fourth line. Basically, they're bumping bodies. They're getting the pucks back. Eventually, the puck goes up to the point for Spurgeon. He fires it through traffic, and he gets his 10th of the season. And then, 2 minutes after that, Matthew Highmore, the guy who got the first penalty of the game, he scores. He gets his 5th of the season with 10:38 to go. Basically, puck is flipped into the Minnesota zone. Spurgeon ends up losing it because it just bounces off of his stick wrong. He can't control it. So then Highmore steals it away. He's got a breakaway. and he goes top shelf on Cam Talbot. So, just like that, the Canucks have found an answer for 2 goals already. And again, at 5:30, I put down that there's more physical play happening, but it's still a back-and-forth hockey game. Now there's starting to be a couple more hits. Now it's starting to be more playing to the whistle, possibly through the whistle for both teams. So, and it's especially true with Luke Schenn and Kirill Kaprizov. These two were battling. Okay? Luke Schenn is a much bigger guy than Kirill Kaprizov, but Kaprizov did not want to be taken lightly. So he would come up, he'd bump him, he'd try and play through as much as he could. They're both just dogfighting out there, trying their best to see if anything ends up happening. But the Canucks managed to take the lead for the first time in this game. With 3:51 to go in the second, Elias Pettersson gets his second of the game and his 31st of the season, assisted by Garland and Dermott. Not Dermott. Basically, this shot ends up getting fired in by Garland, and Pettersson is there to just cash home the rebound. So 2 goals already for Elias Pettersson, and now the Canucks have their first lead of the game. And the game still seems surprisingly even. Even with the Canucks finally getting their first lead of the game, it didn't feel like Minnesota was out of it. It still felt like they were grinding and still trying to get something going. And eventually, that leads to something good. Because as Kaprizov had been battling Luke Schenn, there was a somewhat controversial hit, or a hit that Kaprizov really didn't like, where Luke Schenn kind of barrels down on top of him, almost like, not elbowing, but like the forearm. You try and push your guy down and then leave him away. Nick Delorier did not take very lightly to that. So he ends up fighting Luke Schenn. He gets the building back into it. It's a pretty even fight for both the two. That energy eventually leads to a goal from Matt Zuccarello with 1:24 to go in the second period. It's his 23rd of the season, assisted by Kaprizov and John Merrill. Look at that. He's back into it. Basically, it was a great outlet pass by John Merrill, who gets it up to Zuccarello, then gets it to Kaprizov. Kaprizov able to defend the puck well, putting his body in front of the defender, almost as if he's just, showing his ass to him over there, just saying, hey, how you like this? Oh, whoops, let me pass it over to Zuccarello. And lo and behold, Zuccarello, just brilliant shot, just fires it right over blocker side of Thatcher Demko. And lo and behold, it's a 3-3 game. So, just like that, after no goals in the first period, we get 6. 3 from each side, and it's a 3-3 hockey game after the second. Basically, this game, if ties were still a thing in the NHL, I'm willing to bet this game probably would have gone down to a tie. Had Minnesota not won this, I'm willing to bet a tie would have happened in this game, because these two teams are just dogfighting, going as hard as they can. And it doesn't seem like there's a clear victor at all. And it kind of seemed that way pretty much the whole way through the beginning of the third period. So into the second, shots are 20-17 in favor of Vancouver. Again, it's an even game. It's a very even game. Third period, they also announced that Kirill's birthday is the game against the Coyotes, so they're releasing pretty sick t-shirts for those who go there. If anybody wants to get me one, please, by all means. I love one. But then at 17:09 of the third period, Vancouver ends up taking a too-many-men penalty. So the Wild power play gets another chance again. And this time, they were so damn close. Multiple chances bouncing off of Demko's pad. Pucks loose in the slot. Just diving at it, trying to see if they can get anything going. Nothing manages to work. It was the best power play the Wild had all night, considering they didn't really have that many. But it still looked good. It just not enough to get into the back of the net. And also at 16:57, during that penalty kill for Vancouver, JT Miller ends up taking a shot that hits him right, if I could put my knee up, right there. Right where the pad just cuts off. Pad usually goes right about to here. It hits him there. And so he goes down in a heap. Goes down immediately. So he's taken off to the bench, and he's able to somewhat skate off on his own power. So that's good. It's good to see JT Miller get up from that, because if the Canucks are getting into the playoffs, they're going to need him to do that. Then at 11:45, Kevin Fiala ends up getting hit up high by Tyler Myers. So now another power play for Minnesota. But once again, nothing manages to come of it. Then eventually Ryan Hartman and Oliver Ekman-Larsson both get tangled up in the net. Basically Hartman trying to dig at the puck when Demko has it. Oliver Ekman-Larsson standing up for his goaltender. Demko just steals Hartman's sticks and just chucks it across the ice. Basically in disgust, it's like trying to say, you can't dig at me as I have the puck. So instead of penalties going one way or the other, they just say, screw it. Let's just give both Hartman and OEL roughing penalties and 5-on-5. Let's just keep these guys in the box. So that's what happens. Both get 2 roughing penalties, and it's still 5-on-5. And that was at 9:51 to go in the third period. And then they ended up showing a pretty funny stat, but one that rings very true. Minnesota has been in 8 overtime games since March 24th. That is more than anybody else in the NHL. We have won a lot of our games in overtime, and that is why we needed this win against St. Louis, because St. Louis has won the majority of their games, or more of their games, in regulation. And that stat, if it came down to ties and points at the end of the season, that stat is what they're going to look at. Regulation wins. Not regulation overtime wins, regulation wins. And St. Louis would have the edge on that. I don't think we can make up that ground in that stat with this many games left in the season. I don't think so. But we'll just keep getting points, honestly. If we keep getting points and St. Louis eventually, loses another game, it'd be nice if they could lose to San Jose tonight. That'd be cool. But we just need we need St. Louis just to lose, okay? Because they finally lost against Boston in overtime. So now we tied back up with them in points. But we just need them to lose. That's really it. We're back to where we were before we played them. We don't play St. Louis anymore until the postseason. We do play Nashville, we play Colorado, and we play Calgary as well. Our last road game is against Nashville. That is the game after this next one where we face Seattle. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyway, we're in the third period. It's an even game. It's going back and forth for the most part. Nobody can really seem to break anything until, guess who rings the dinner bell yet again? 7:34 to go in the third period, assisted by Brodin and Gaudreau. Guess who it is? And no, his name does not start with a K. It starts with an F. It's Kevin Fiala. He gets his 32nd of the season. And basically, it looks like a Kaprizov goal, too, because all Fiala does, gets the puck, uses incredible puck control just to circle around the zone, continues to go. Eventually, he finds his way into the slot, and he fires short side, and it's in. 4-3. All of a sudden, there's the goal that breaks everything. All of a sudden, that's basically in a way, it's pretty much a dagger for Vancouver. And it was funny because they showed how this play ended up starting. Boldy flipped this puck up high. Kevin Fiala headbutts it. Literally, European soccer player headbutts this puck down onto the ice, and then is able to do all his circling, all those great skills that he knows how to do. And he's another one of our stars. People put a lot of pressure on Kaprizov because he's got all those accolades. Kevin Fiala has played ridiculously good. And I know he's streaky. I get that. But once he breaks out of that streak, once he finally starts scoring, he's lights out. He's nuts. And again, it's that line. It's Gaudreau. Gaudreau had a ridiculous play leading up to this where he managed to dangle and stick handle through literally 3 guys. And then he passes the puck off to Fiala, and then all this ends up happening. This is fun hockey to watch. And Kevin Fiala makes it so. That line makes it so. All 3 of our forward lines, including the 4th line, they're fun to watch too. Even seeing Dewar, Mitchell, Chafee. Who else they have on the 4th line there? It wasn't Delorier because they moved him up to the Grief line. Duhaime. That's who it is. I know a lot of people don't like Duhaime. I do. And it was good to see him get on the score sheet here. They're fun to watch. And like I've said before, that's what makes this Wild team different from any others we've ever had. This Wild team has 3 players that are gunning for franchise records. Fiala literally is now tied with Eric Staal. Or actually, he might have beat him on that one. He might have beat him on that goal right there, where he was tied with Eric Stahl for franchise points with 76. Stahl got that in like 2017, 2018. I keep forgetting Eric Stahl was on the Wild. That's how ridiculous this team is. I keep forgetting, wait, we had him at one point. Oh, man. And so that's his 9th goal in 8 games for Kevin Fiala. He is absurd. If he's not Jesus, he's pretty damn close. And Minnesota now all of a sudden takes over. Vancouver is just trying to stop the bleeding, stop the flooding. It just doesn't work. Because with 1:55 left to go in the game, the true dagger, assisted by Hartman and Zuccarello, his 44th of the season, Kirill Kaprizov. And this one wasn't his cleanest goal ever. Basically, it's a hard-fought battle in the corner in which Hartman ends up winning the battle. Or Zuccarello won it, gets it over to Hartman with like this much room as far as passing. Somehow a stick doesn't bat that puck away. Gets it to Hartman. Hartman ends up throwing it to Kaprizov. He barely manages to get his stick on it. It's a low, fluttering puck that manages to just go 5-hole and just sink in. And it's 5-3. And now it is just, floodgates are opening. They really should have pulled the goalie earlier, but they decide not to. Vancouver takes a timeout after this, and then eventually empties the net with 1:36 to go, to which Ryan Hartman, with minute 13 left, gets an empty netter, his 32nd of the season, assisted by Kaprizov and Zuccarello, and that eventually wins this game for Minnesota. Shots were 32-24 in favor of the Wild at the end of the game. And it's a scrappy, hard-fought win because we always seem to have scrappy games against the Canucks because that's who they are. The Canucks are a very scrappy, young, hungry team. And it sucks that they didn't get these points, well, for them. But frankly, I feel like they're better than the Stars. Now, I'll say they're a good team. They are a good team to watch, and they could definitely... I don't think they wouldn't be swept in the playoffs. I'll say that. If they make the playoffs, they're not getting swept. Because it's a hard-fought, hungry team. They're still trying as much as they could. So the new record for the Wild ends up being 49-21-7 with 105 points on the season, and we're second in the Central. And we'll stay that way regardless of the game between St. Louis and San Jose tonight because we have the tiebreaker over them with games in hand. But it would be nice to get at least a 2-point lead on St. Louis and just say, yeah, we're just going to take it from here. So our next game is tomorrow. It's a back-to-back, but it's on home ice, 8 Eastern, against the Seattle Kraken. It's their first time coming to St. Paul, and it's the last time we'll face them this season, obviously. But let's just make sure that we get another win against teams that aren't really that good. This team is the bottom of the Pacific. Makes sense for the Kraken because that's usually where they are. Like, mythology-wise, they are never near the surface. They're usually at the bottom of the Pacific. It makes too much sense. I feel sorry for Kraken fans because they had to deal with actual expansion like we did back in 2000. But they didn't have an extra franchise to go along with that. So, way to go, Columbus. But anyway, that is all for this video. Thank you for watching. If you liked it, click like. If you want to see more of these videos, click subscribe because I've got more of them coming. And again, I'm going to continue to follow this team because they are way too much fun. And if they re-sign Fiala, I might get him tattooed on my body. I don't know yet, but we'll see. And as always, I will talk to you all later. Can't wait to see you in the next one. Peace.